The air in the upscale restaurant crackled with a tension so thick it could be cut with a steak knife. Crystal chandeliers dripped with opulent light, reflecting off the polished silverware and the strained smiles of the affluent diners. None, in a simple, almost apologetic dress, stood ramrod straight, her knuckles white as she gripped the strap of her worn handbag. Across the table, her ex-husband, Mark, shifted uncomfortably in his Italian leather chair, his gaze flitting between Non and the heavily pregnant woman beside him. It was a tableau of betrayal, rendered in stark relief by the extravagant setting. So, Non began, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor that ran through her. She forced a tight smile. "This is it then. The big reveal." Mark cleared his throat, avoiding her eyes. "Non, please, let's not do this here." "Where, Mark?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "Where would be appropriate? At your lawyer's office, over divorce papers, or perhaps in the delivery room when your new family welcomes their latest addition." The pregnant woman, Serena, touched Mark's arm, a carefully crafted expression of concern on her face. Her designer handbag, perched strategically on the table, seemed to mock Non's own. Non felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but she held it in check. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. "Non, I told you. It just happened," Mark stammered, his usual smooth confidence replaced by a stammering awkwardness. "We didn't plan this." "Oh, of course," Non replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's a classic, the accidental pregnancy with the mistress." "Truly, you're breaking new ground in originality," Serena's carefully constructed composure cracked, revealing a flash of annoyance. "You have no right to speak to Mark this way." "Oh, I think I do," Non said, leaning forward. "I spent 5 years building a life with this man, only to have it ripped away by a spontaneous creation. Forgive me if I'm not overflowing with congratulations." Mark finally met her gaze, a flicker of something akin to shame in his eyes. "Non, we can talk about the settlement." "Settlement?" Non laughed, a hollow, brittle sound. "What settlement can possibly compensate for the systematic dismantling of my life? For the dreams we shared? The future we planned? You think a check can erase the betrayal, the humiliation?" She felt the tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not cry in front of them, not here. Not now. She gathered her remaining shreds of dignity and turned to leave. But a sudden movement caught her eye. A man at the next table had risen, his presence commanding attention even in this room filled with wealth and power. He was tall, with a sharp, angular face and eyes that seemed to pierce through the superficiality of the room. His suit, impeccably tailored, spoke of quiet power, of a man accustomed to command. He held a glass of amber liquid, swirling it gently as he observed the unfolding drama. Non hesitated, momentarily caught off guard by his intense gaze. He didn't look away, his eyes holding hers with an unnerving intensity. It wasn't pity she saw in them, nor judgment. It was something else entirely, something that sent a shiver down her spine. "Perhaps," the man said, his voice smooth as velvet, yet carrying an undeniable weight, "the lady would prefer to discuss this matter in a more private setting." Mark, flustered by the interruption, opened his mouth to protest, but the man's gaze silenced him. Non felt a sudden surge of defiance. She was tired of being the victim, the discarded wife. She wanted, more than anything, to reclaim some semblance of control. She looked from Mark and Serena, their faces a mixture of confusion and annoyance, to the stranger, his expression unreadable. "Yes," she said, her voice regaining its strength. "I believe I would." The man gestured towards a secluded corner of the restaurant. "Please, allow me," as Non followed him. She couldn't shake the feeling that this unexpected encounter was about to change everything. The humiliation, the betrayal, The raw pain it all seemed to recede slightly, replaced by a flicker of anticipation. A spark of hope in the darkness. She didn't know who this man was or what his motives were, but one thing was certain. She was no longer alone. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. The corner booth was bathed in soft light, creating an intimate space within the bustling restaurant. The man gestured for Non to sit, then settled opposite her, his movements fluid and graceful. He still held the glass of amber liquid, but hadn't taken a sip. "My name is Lucas Yetting," he said, his voice low and resonant. "And you are?" "None," she replied, still feeling slightly disoriented by the sudden shift in the situation. "Non Lin," he nodded, his eyes studying her. "I overheard your conversation. I apologize for intruding, but I couldn't help but notice your predicament." Non hesitated. Predicament? Being publicly humiliated by a philandering husband and his paramour? Lucas stated bluntly, his gaze unwavering. "It's not a pleasant experience." Non felt the wave of emotion wash over her. Shame, anger, and a strange sense of gratitude for this stranger's unexpected intervention. "No," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not." Lucas set down his glass. "Tell me, Ms. Lin, what do you intend to do?" The stale, antiseptic smell of the hospital clung to Non like a shroud. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the pale walls. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, once a steady pulse of life, had flatlined into an unnerving silence. Her father's hand, gnarled and spotted with age, lay still in hers, cold and unfamiliar. Just hours ago, she'd held it tight, whispering promises of better days, of fighting this insidious disease together. Now, only the echo of those promises remained, mocking her in the hollow quiet of the room. Non closed her eyes, the sting of tears a familiar ache. Grief was a heavy cloak, suffocating her with its weight. But even amidst the raw pain, a chilling premonition of what lay ahead began to creep in. Her father, despite his failing health, had been her shield, the last bastion against her family's avarice. Now, that shield was gone. Leaving the sterile room, she stepped into the chaotic energy of the hospital corridor. Her stepmother, Milin, and half-sister, Lily, were huddled together, their voices hushed but sharp. They weren't crying. Non noticed Lily clutch her designer handbag tighter, an almost predatory glint in her eyes. The sight sent a wave of nausea through Non. "Non," Milin said, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. "This is difficult, but we must be strong." Non just nodded, unable to speak past the lump forming in her throat. "Your father, he didn't leave a will, did he?" Lily asked, the pretense of grief completely gone. Her eyes darted towards Non, sharp and calculating. Non's breath hitched. He had. He promised her he'd ensured her future, protecting her from their grasping hands. She remembered the relief she'd felt, a small flicker of hope in the face of his declining health. Where was it? She frantically searched her bag, pulling out crumpled tissues, a half-eaten granola bar, her phone, but the folded document was gone. Panic clenched at her throat. She distinctly remembered placing it in her bag after their last meeting with the lawyer. Had it fallen out? Had someone taken it? Her gaze landed on Lily, who was now openly smirking, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. Understanding hit Non with the force of a physical blow. Lily had taken it. "What are you talking about?" Non asked, her voice trembling. "Oh, darling," Lily purred, a cruel smile twisting her lips. "Daddy seemed to have forgotten all about you in his final days. Such a shame. It appears that everything goes to Milan and me." Milan placed a comforting hand on Lily's arm, her expression a mask of innocent concern. "We'll take care of everything. Dear, you don't need to worry about these complicated matters. The world spun around Non, her father's house, the small inheritance he'd promised. Everything was gone, stolen. They'd stripped her bare, leaving her with nothing but the crushing weight of grief and the bitter taste of betrayal. Days turned into weeks, a blur of legal jargon and cold, dismissive smiles. Non's stepmother and sister efficiently dismantled her father's life, selling the house, liquidating his assets, leaving Non with nothing but a single suitcase and the clothes on her back. She'd been evicted from her apartment, unable to afford the rent without her father's support. She was adrift, lost in a sea of despair. One evening, she found herself sitting on a park bench, the biting wind whipping her hair around her face. The city lights blurred through her tears, a kaleidoscope of indifferent brilliance. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and exhaustion weighed heavily on her limbs. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. Suddenly, a deep voice cut through the night. "Excuse me, miss." Non looked up, startled. Standing before her was a tall, imposing figure, his features obscured by the shadows of the trees. He held out a hand, offering her a steaming cup of coffee. "It's a cold night," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. "You look like you could use this." Non hesitated, her mind racing. She was very vulnerable, but the warmth emanating from the cup and the genuine concern in his eyes were too tempting to resist. She took the cup, her fingers brushing against his. His hand was warm and strong, a stark contrast to the icy air. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. He nodded, his eyes searching hers. "You seem troubled." The dam of her emotions finally broke. The carefully constructed wall of composure she'd built around herself crumbled, and the tears flowed freely. She told him everything, pouring out her story of betrayal, loss, and despair, her voice choked with sobs. He listened patiently, his gaze never wavering, a silent pillar of strength in the face of her storm. When she finally finished, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the wind. He took a step closer, his face now illuminated by the faint glow of a nearby street lamp. It was Yetting, the enigmatic CEO she'd met briefly weeks before, the man who had seen her at her most humiliated moment. His expression was unreadable, his eyes filled with a mixture of compassion and something else, something that made her heart skip a beat. "I can help you," he said, his voice low and steady. "I can help you get everything back." The air in the pawn shop hung thick with the scent of dust and forgotten dreams. Non clutched her grandmother's jade pendant, its smooth surface cold against her trembling palm. The offer the pawnbroker made was insulting, barely enough for a week's groceries. Tears pricked her eyes, a burning humiliation adding to the raw grief that had been her constant companion since her ex-husband, Mark, had emptied their joint account and left her with nothing but debt and a mountain of legal fees. "I need to think about it," she stammered, snatching the pendant back and fleeing the shop, the bell above the door jingling mockingly behind her. Outside, the city buzzed with indifferent energy. Cars honked, people rushed past, absorbed in their own lives. Non felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of indifference. She sank onto a cold stone bench in a small, neglected park, the jade pendant clutched tight in her hand. Just when despair threatened to engulf her completely, her sleek black car pulled up beside the curb. The window rolled down, revealing Yetting. He looked as impeccably dressed as he had the day they met at the gala, a stark contrast to Non's worn jeans and faded sweater. A wave of shame washed over her. She hadn't seen him since that night, the night he'd offered to help, an offer she'd initially dismissed as a rich man's whim. "Non," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Are you all right?" She shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The memory of Mark's cruel laughter, his dismissive words echoing in her ears, tightened her chest. "Get in," Yeting said, his gaze steady and unwavering. There was no judgment in his eyes, only concern. Hesitantly, Nom rose and approached the car. The door opened silently, revealing a plush leather interior that smelled faintly of sandalwood. She slid inside, the warmth of the car a stark contrast to the chill that had settled deep in her bones. "I saw you leaving the pawn shop," Yeting said, his voice gentle. "I know you're struggling." Non looked away, shame burning her cheeks. "I shouldn't have bothered you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I told you I didn't need your help. You said you didn't want my charity," Yeting corrected, his tone even. "But this isn't charity. None. This is an investment in justice." Non turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise. "What do you mean?" Yeting's lips curved into a slight smile. "I've been doing some digging. Your husband's financial dealings, let's just say they're not entirely above board." Non's heart pounded in her chest. She knew Mark had been secretive about his business, but she never suspected anything illegal. He stole from me," she whispered, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. "He took everything and left me to drown in debt." "He stole from more than just you," Yeting said, his voice hardening. "And I intend to make him pay." A flicker of hope ignited within Non, a small spark in the vast darkness of her despair. Could Yeting really help her? Could he bring Ma to justice and help her reclaim her life? "But why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this for me?" Yeting looked at her, his gaze intense. "Because," he said, his voice low and husky, "I admire your strength. You've been through hell, and yet you're still standing. You deserve to fight back." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He opened it, revealing a delicate diamond necklace, its stones sparkling in the soft light of the car. "This," he said, his voice laced with an emotion Non couldn't quite decipher, "is a down payment. A symbol of our partnership. We're going to take everything back, Non. Everything he stole from you, and more." Non stared at the necklace, mesmerized by its brilliance. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of hope, a promise of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. A wave of gratitude washed over her, so powerful it threatened to overwhelm her. She looked at Yeting, her eyes shining with unused tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." Yeting reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a surprising jolt of warmth through her. "You don't have to," he said, his voice soft. "Just trust me." And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet luxury of the car, with Yeting's hand holding hers, Non felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The fight ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone. She had an ally, a powerful ally, and together, they would face whatever came their way. The jade pendant, still clutched in her other hand, suddenly felt lighter, a reminder of the past, but no longer a symbol of her despair. The diamond necklace, gleaming on the velvet, represented a new beginning, a chance at a future she hadn't dared to dream of. The penthouse apartment, a glass and steel area overlooking the city's restless sprawl, shimmered with the last rays of the setting sun. Non stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her reflection a fragile ghost against the panorama of twinkling lights. The city, once a symbol of her dreams, now mocked her with its indifference. Sue's venomous words echoed in her ears, a cruel soundtrack to the breathtaking view. "You'll never see a penny of that money, Non. It's mine now." Non clenched her fists, the fabric of Yeting's cashmere shawl crumpling in her grip. He had draped it over her shoulders earlier, a silent gesture of comfort after Sue's latest onslaught. The warmth of the fabric was a stark contrast to the icy fear that gripped her heart. She'd been so naive, so trusting, She'd believed in the fairy tale, the loving husband, the supportive family. Now, stripped bare of everything, she was left with nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal. Sue, emboldened by her initial victory, had escalated her attacks. Lawyers' letters arrived daily, each one a fresh wound, chipping away at Non's resolve. Sue, flashing a triumphant smile, had even paraded around in Non's mother's antique pearl necklace, a cherished heirloom Non had believed safe in the family vault. "It suits me, don't you think, darling?" Sue had purred, her voice laced with malicious glee. "After all, I'm the one who inherited everything." The memory sent a wave of nausea through Non. She closed her eyes, struggling to control the trembling that racked her body. She had to fight back. She owed it to her mother, to herself, to reclaim what was rightfully hers. But how? She felt like a small boat tossed about in a stormy sea, with no land in sight. A quiet cough broke the silence. Non turned to see Yetting standing in the doorway, his presence a calming force in the chaotic storm of her emotions. He held a glass of amber liquid. "Brandy," she guessed, and offered it to her with a small, encouraging smile. "You look like you could use this," he said, his voice a low rumble that resonated deep within her. She accepted the glass gratefully, the warmth of the brandy spreading through her chilled veins. Yetting moved to stand beside her, his gaze fixed on the cityscape below. The silence stretched between them, comfortable and companionable, a silent acknowledgement of the shared battle they were facing. He had been her unexpected ally, her rock in the turbulent waters of her life. From their initial, awkward encounter at the charity gala, where she'd been humiliated by her ex-husband and his new, glamorous girlfriend, to this moment, he'd been her constant support. He'd offered her refuge in his luxurious apartment, provided her with legal counsel, and, most importantly, given her the strength to believe in herself again. "I won't let her win, Yetting," Non said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. "I won't let her take everything." He turned to face her, his eyes, usually guarded and inscrutable, filled with a warmth that sent a shiver down her spine. "I know you won't," he said softly, "and I'll be here, every step of the way." His words were a balm to her wounded spirit. For the first time since the nightmare began, a flicker of hope ignited within her. With Yetting beside her, she felt a surge of strength, a renewed sense of purpose. "She's trying to intimidate me," Non continued, her voice gaining strength. "She keeps sending these threatening messages, hinting that she has more dirt on me, things she expose if I don't back down." Yetting's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "Let her try," he said, his voice hardening. "We'll be ready for her." He reached out, his hand covering hers, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her body. It was more than just a gesture of comfort. It was a promise, a silent vow of protection. The warmth of his hand seeped into her skin, thawing the icy fear that had been clinging to her. "I've been thinking," Yetting said, his gaze intense. "We need to change our strategy. We need to go on the offensive." Non looked at him questioningly. He outlined his plan, a bold and audacious move that would expose Sue's lies and manipulations. It was risky, but the potential reward was immense. As he spoke, a sense of excitement began to bubble within her, replacing the fear and despair that had been weighing her down. The city lights twinkled below, no longer mocking her, beckoning her forward. The battle was far from over. With Yetting by her side, she felt a surge of hope, a belief that she could overcome the betrayal and reclaim her life. The penthouse, once a symbol of her isolation, now felt like a command center, a place where she could strategize, plan, and fight. The reflection in the glass no longer showed a fragile ghost, but a warrior, ready to face whatever came her way. The penthouse suite shimmered, a glass and chrome palace suspended above the city. Non, dressed in a sleek, sapphire dress Yetting had insisted she buy, felt a tremor of unease despite the breathtaking view. Below, the city lights twinkled like fallen stars, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. Yetting, elegant in a dark suit, poured 2 glasses of champagne, the golden liquid bubbling like her anxieties. "Sue's betrayal runs deeper than you thought," he said, his voice a low rumble that resonated through the room. He handed her a tablet, the screen glowing with incriminating emails. Non's stomach clenched as she scrolled through them, each message a fresh wound. Sue, her supposed best friend, hadn't just seduced her ex-husband. She'd orchestrated the entire downfall, poisoning Non's reputation, manipulating events with surgical precision. "I can't believe it," Non whispered, her voice thick with tears. The betrayal felt physical, her suffocating weight on her chest. She trusted Sue implicitly, confided in her, shared her vulnerabilities. Now, those shared secrets had become weapons, expertly wielded against her. Yetting sat beside her, his presence a solid anchor in the swirling chaos of her emotions. "Believe it, Non, and now we'll make her believe the consequences." His eyes, usually guarded, flashed with a dangerous glint. The following days unfolded with a quiet intensity. Yetting, with his vast network of influence, became her silent weapon. He didn't offer empty platitudes or false reassurances. He acted. He unearthed evidence of Sue's fraudulent dealings, exposed her lies to her new husband, and systematically dismantled the carefully constructed facade she had built. Non, initially hesitant, found a strange sense of empowerment in the unfolding plan. It wasn't about petty revenge. It was about reclaiming her narrative, her truth. One evening, they sat on the balcony of his penthouse, the city lights a blurred backdrop to their conversation. A cool breeze rustled through Non's hair, carrying the scent of rain and the distant hum of traffic. Yetting had explained the intricate legal web he had spun around Sue, ensuring she faced the consequences of her actions without directly implicating Non. "It's over, Non," he said, his voice softer than usual. He looked at her, his gaze intense, searching. "You don't have to carry this burden anymore." Non looked out at the sprawling cityscape, a sense of weary relief washing over her. She had spent weeks, months, drowning in a sea of betrayal and self-doubt. Now, finally, she could breathe. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate to express the gratitude she felt. She turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "I don't know what I would have done without you." A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. He reached out, his fingers brushing against hers, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver down her spine. The silence between them stretched, charged with an unspoken tension. Then, he withdrew his hand, his expression carefully neutral. "You're stronger than you think, Non," he said, his voice regaining its usual composure. "You faced this. You fought back. I just helped you find your footing." Over the next few weeks, Non began to rebuild her life, piece by shattered piece. With Yetting's support, she secured a new job, one that allowed her to utilize her skills and regain her sense of purpose. She found a small apartment, a sanctuary away from the ghosts of her past. She started to rediscover the woman she had been before the betrayal, the woman she had almost lost. Yetting remained a constant presence in her life, a steady source of strength and encouragement. He took her to art exhibitions, introduced her to new experiences, and challenged her to step outside her comfort zone. Their bond deepened, evolving from a transactional arrangement into something far more complex, more intimate. One evening, he invited her to another dinner at his penthouse. This time, the atmosphere was different. The usual formality had melted away, replaced by a palpable sense of anticipation. As they ate, they talked, Not about revenge or business, but about their dreams, their fears, their vulnerabilities. After dinner, they stood on the balcony, overlooking the glittering cityscape. The air was still, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the city. Yeting turned to her, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Non," he began, his voice husky with emotion. He paused, as if searching for the right words. "I've never met anyone like you." Non's breath caught in her throat. She had been waiting for this moment, dreading it, hoping for it. The unspoken question hung in the air between them, thick with unspoken desire. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to cup her face. His touch was gentle, reverent. "I'm falling in love with you, Non." The words, simple yet profound, resonated through her, echoing the feelings she had tried so hard to suppress. Tears welled in her eyes, tears of relief, of joy, of love. "I'm in love with you too, Yeting," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, a tentative touch that blossomed into a passionate kiss. The city lights twinkled around them, a silent witness to their love, a testament to the resilience of the human heart. In that moment, surrounded by the glittering expanse of the city, Non knew she had found not only her footing, but a forever. The grand ballroom shimmered, a kaleidoscope of crystal chandeliers and swirling gowns. Non, no longer the downtrodden woman in a stained apron, stood radiant in a crimson dress that flowed around her like liquid fire. Diamonds, a gift from Yeting, glittered at her throat and ears, mirroring the fire in her eyes. Tonight, the masquerade wasn't just about hiding identities. It was about revealing truths. Across the room, Susan, Non's ex-husband's scheming mistress, preened under the admiring gaze of her circle. She wore a smug smile, the same one that had haunted Non for months. Susan believed her lies had secured her future, a future built on Non's broken dreams. She was wrong. Non took a deep breath, her hand finding Yeting's. His presence, a steady anchor in the swirling chaos, gave her strength. The plan they had meticulously crafted over weeks of whispered conversations and late-night strategizing was about to unfold. The subtle shift in Yeting's expression, a flicker of amusement in his usually impassive eyes, told her the moment was near. A hush fell over the ballroom as a spotlight illuminated a small stage. A microphone stand stood waiting, a silent promise of revelation. Yeting gave Non's hand a reassuring squeeze before stepping back, allowing her to take center stage. Non's heart pounded against her ribs, but her voice, when she spoke, was clear and steady. "Tonight," she began, her gaze sweeping over the assembled guests, "we celebrate truth." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. Susan's smile faltered, replaced by a look of unease. "Some of us wear masks, not of silk and feathers," Non continued, her voice rising slightly, "but of deceit and manipulation." Her eyes locked onto Susan's, pinning her like a butterfly to a collector's board. "For months, I lived a lie, a victim of betrayal and carefully constructed falsehoods." The whispers intensified. The guests, a mix of socialites, business magnates, and curious onlookers, leaned forward, captivated. Susan's face paled beneath her expertly applied makeup. Non reached into a small clutch, pulling out a USB drive. She held it aloft, a small, unassuming object that held the power to shatter Susan's carefully crafted facade. "This," she announced, her voice ringing with authority, "contains irrefutable proof of the lies and schemes that have poisoned my life." A projector whirred to life, casting a large image onto the wall behind Non. It was a series of emails, meticulously documented, revealing Susan's manipulative tactics, her fabricated stories, her calculated efforts to destroy Non's marriage and reputation. Each email was a nail in Susan's coffin, hammered home by Non's calm, unwavering narration. The ballroom erupted in a cacophony of gasps and murmurs. Susan's carefully constructed world crumbled around her. Her supporters, once eager to bask in her reflected glory, now recoiled in disgust. The whispers turned to accusations, the admiring glances to glares of contempt. Susan, trapped in the spotlight's harsh glare, stammered denials, but her words were lost in the rising tide of condemnation. Her carefully crafted mask of innocence shattered, revealing the ugliness beneath. None watched Susan's downfall with a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. This wasn't the triumphant revenge she had once craved. It was simply the truth, finally brought to light. As the security guards escorted a sobbing Susan from the ballroom, none felt a sense of release wash over her. The weight of months of injustice lifted, replaced by a lightness she hadn't felt in years. She turned to find Jetting standing beside her, his eyes filled with quiet admiration. He took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You were magnificent," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the receding murmurs of the crowd. None smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. "We were magnificent," she corrected, her gaze locking with his. The shared secret, the meticulous planning, the perfectly executed plan. It had forged a bond between them that went beyond mere attraction. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Indeed," he agreed, his eyes twinkling. "And now, Ms. Nunn, I believe a celebration is in order." He led her away from the stage, away from the lingering whispers and curious glances. As they moved through the ballroom, the other guests parted, their expressions a mixture of awe and respect. Nunn, no longer invisible, no longer a victim, walked tall, her head held high. On the balcony overlooking the city lights, Jetting turned to her, his expression softening. "You know," he said, his voice low and intimate, "when we first met, I saw a woman of remarkable strength and resilience, hidden beneath layers of hurt and self-doubt." None met his gaze, her heart swelling with emotion. "And I," she replied, her voice trembling slightly, "saw a man who believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. "I still believe in you, Nunn," he whispered, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. "And he paused, his eyes searching hers. "I find myself falling in love with you." Tears welled in Nunn's eyes, tears of joy and relief. "I'm falling in love with you too, Jetting," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, a tentative, questioning touch. Then, as if all the unspoken words, all the shared secrets, all the unspoken desires had finally found their voice, he kissed her. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss, not a dramatic, sweeping gesture. It was a slow, tender kiss, filled with promise and hope. A kiss that sealed not only their love but the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. A chapter written not by fate or circumstance, but by their own strength, resilience, and unwavering belief in each other. The city lights twinkled below, a backdrop to their newfound happiness, a testament to the power of second chances, and the promise of a future filled with love, laughter, and the quiet joy of simply being together. The penthouse suite shimmered, a panorama of city lights twinkling below like a scattered handful of diamonds. Nunn stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, the midnight blue silk of her gown whispering against the glass. She held a flute of champagne, barely touched, the bubbles mirroring the effervescence of her own emotions. Jetting approached, his presence filling the space not with dominance, but with the quiet strength that had become her anchor in the storm of the past few months. His tailored suit, the same shade of night as the sky outside, accentuated his broad shoulders and the intensity of his gaze, a gaze now softened as it rested on her. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Nunn murmured, the cityscape a metaphor for the new life stretching before her. Not as beautiful as you, Yetting reply, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. He took her free hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through her. The simplicity of the gesture, the sincerity in his eyes, resonated deeper than any grand declaration. You say that now, Non teased, a playful lilt in her voice, a stark contrast to the defeated woman she had been just months ago. Before Yetting had entered her life, before he'd helped her reclaim her dignity, piece by fractured piece, after her ex-husband, Mark, and her own family had left her emotionally and financially bankrupt. Yetting chuckled, the sound rich and genuine. I said it then, at that ridiculous charity gala, when you were covered in red wine and fury. He paused, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. I meant it then, just as much as I mean it now. That humiliating night, the catalyst to their unconventional partnership, felt like a lifetime ago. Mark, flaunting his new, much younger girlfriend, had orchestrated the wine incident, a cruel public display of his disregard for none. Yetting, a stranger at the time, had witnessed the entire scene. He'd not only offered her a clean handkerchief and a quiet word of comfort, had also, in the ensuing weeks, become her silent benefactor, her strategist, her shield against the onslaught of betrayal and public ridicule. He had empowered her to rebuild her life, to start her own business, to face Mark and her family with her head held high. I still can't believe you did all of that for me, Non confessed, turning to face him fully. The memory of the legal battles, the successful launch of her own design company, the stunned silence of her family when she finally confronted them. All of it felt surreal. A complete stranger. Not so strange, Yetting corrected, his eyes locking with hers. I saw a woman of incredible strength and resilience being trampled on. I saw a spark that deserved to be reignited. And selfishly, he added, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, I wanted to see what that spark could become. Non's heart swelled. This man, who had started as a mysterious benefactor, had become so much more. Her confidant, her friend, the man who had shown her that she was worthy of love and respect. And what did you find? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Yetting stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. He raised his hand, gently cupping her cheek. I found a woman who is not only strong and resilient, but also kind, compassionate, and breathtakingly beautiful. I found a woman. He paused, his gaze searching hers, a flicker of vulnerability in his usually composed demeanor. A woman I love. The words hung in the air, shimmering like the city lights below. Non's breath caught in her throat. She had known. She had hoped. But hearing him say it, witnessing the raw emotion in his eyes, was overwhelming. Yetting, she began, but words failed her. Instead, she reached up, her hand covering his, her fingers intertwining with his. He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. I know this wasn't the conventional fairy tale, he murmured, but what we have built, what we have overcome together, is far more real, far more powerful than any storybook romance. He pulled back slightly, his gaze holding hers. Non, will you? He reached into his pocket, retrieving a small, velvet box. He opened it, revealing a simple, elegant diamond ring, its brilliance capturing the reflected city lights. Spend the rest of your fairy tale, or rather, your real life, with me. Tears welled in Non's eyes, tears not of sadness or pain, but of pure, unadulterated joy. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Yes, she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. 1,000 times yes. Yetting's face broke into a radiant smile, a smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. He slipped the ring onto her finger, the cool metal welcome contrast to the warmth of his touch. He pulled her close, their bodies fitting together perfectly, and kissed her. It was a kiss that spoke volumes. A kiss that sealed not just their love, but also the promise of a future built on mutual respect, trust, and an enduring partnership forged in the fires of adversity. As they stood there, embraced in the shimmering light of the penthouse, with the city spread out beneath them like a tapestry of dreams, none knew that this was not just the end of one chapter, but the beginning of a beautiful, unpredictable, and utterly real love story.